Hi guys, welcome to the FSX 404 channel. Today we're going to go over approaches and landings into Courchevel. The reason the History channel chose Courchevel as number 7 is because this is an airport that has a very short runway at a high altitude. So not only that we have to deal with thin air, reduced engine horsepower, mountainous unpredictable weather, but we also have to deal with a short uphill runway. The first thing to remember about Courchevel is that Courchevel is a VFR airport only, meaning that there are no approaches or landings at this airport unless the weather is VFR. This also means that aside from our altimeter, airspeed indicator, and the compass, we do not need any other instruments to do this approach. We're going to fly the traffic pattern and then we're going to land. We will only use outside landmarks to land at Courchevel. I mentioned above that we'll use the traffic pattern of Courchevel Airport to land at Courchevel. So the first thing we have to do is we have to find out what the proper traffic pattern at Courchevel is. I found one on the internet that is from the year 2007, so that's pretty recent. This visual approach plate may look very similar to the instrument approach plates that we've done before, but it is very different. The instrument approach plate is very specific, while the visual approach plate can be a little bit unnerving. With an instrument approach plate, we know when and where exactly we're supposed to turn. We know our headings, we know our distances, we can do triangulation, GPS, and all that good stuff. But when we're using visual references in VFR, we have to use our judgment. Our judgment is acquired by two things. One is familiarity with the area. If we fly into somewhere we've never been before, we're going to look for the landmarks that the chart tells us. But since we've never been there before, we'll always be a little bit unsure of whether we got the correct landmark. Once we get familiar with the area, we get more comfortable and we can almost do it automatically. The second thing that helps us acquire good judgment when flying is experience. As we get more experience, we'll learn to recognize marks a little more easily. Because in a way, all the visual marks in VFR flying have one thing in common. They're very obvious. So in a way, we learn what to expect from those visual landmarks. Before we get into the approach plate briefing, I just want to remind you guys I have a Twitter account. Please go check it out. There are some videos that you cannot see through search on a YouTube. You can only get the links to those videos through my Twitter account. And the second thing I want to remind you is that I do have an add-on scenery for this flight, so you might say, hey, my Courchevel doesn't look anything like that. So what I did is in the description below, I posted a link to a couple of Courchevel sceneries. Go find the one you like, and it should be pretty similar to what I have over here. Okay, now let's look at this visual approach plate. As you can see, we're going to come in from the point W. We're going to be at about 8,000 feet, or a minimum of 8,000 feet, as we're flying towards the Courchevel Airport. Actually, we're going to be flying towards these mountains right here, just to the left of the peak. Once we pick up the runway visually, we're going to set ourselves up to enter the traffic pattern. As we pass the peak, we're going to start a descent from 8,000 feet down to 7,000 feet for the traffic pattern. And as we're turning, we're going to turn right over the runway to a heading of the runway below us. Just as we overfly the runway, we're going to do a visual turn to the left. Now, according to this approach plate, we're supposed to fly towards the city of Courchevel, which in real life is seen. You can see the houses, but in Microsoft Flight Simulator, we don't have that. So what we're going to do is we're going to fly just beyond the city of Courchevel. There's a little valley, a little gorge. So we're going to turn our airplane to head towards that little valley, that little gorge. Now, this is a triangular pattern. So as we're flying out towards that valley, that's going to be sort of our downwind leg of the pattern. Now, when do we turn and where do we turn to? If we look off to the right side of the approach plate, we're going to see that there's a hill. So pretty much what's going to happen is as soon as we pass that hill, as soon as that mountain passes our wing and we have left it behind, we're going to start a pretty steep turn, about a 30-degree bank turn to head right towards that mountain. Now we have to keep in mind that we are at 7,000, and as we're doing 30-degree bank turns, we can lose altitude pretty quick. So we have to pay very close attention to the altitudes. Now we're going to end our turn heading straight for that mountain. Now this is going to happen pretty quick. Over here it looks pretty square, but in real life this turn is going to be pretty wide. And then just as we're getting out of the turn and facing the mountain, we're probably going to start our turn onto final at the most 5 seconds after we roll out facing that mountain. Once we turn on the final, we're going to first find the runway. We're going to pick it out, and we're not going to start a descent. Now we're only 500 feet AGL, so we're going to be very careful with our descent. We're not going to put full flaps in until we're sure that we're going in for a landing. Now Courchevel, there is no go around at Courchevel. At the point we roll out onto the final, we only have a few seconds to make a decision whether we're go or no go for landing. If we're go, we'll put our flaps full and we're committed to it. No matter what happens, we're committed to that landing. If it looks like we're off, we're too high, or we're too low, we're immediately going to do a right turn and head out and get ourselves out of trouble. But once we're committed to landing, good or bad, one way or the other, we're going in for a landing. Now, from the point W, there is another way to approach the airport and land, and that is to head out directly from the city of Beauzelle. Then from the city of Beauzelle, we'll head out to the mountain. Then we could do our turn on to final and do the same thing we did before. But by doing that, we can get in the way of airplanes flying out or airplanes already coming in and coming out to do the pattern for landing. So pilots are advised to always do in a full approach, fly over the runway, head out for the little valley, the little gorge, make that turn to face the mountain, and then make the final. So that's exactly what we're going to do for the flight part of this approach. We're going to set up the airplane around the point W. We're going to head out for just to the left side of that peak. We're going to pick up the runway visually, enter the traffic pattern, and do the approach. The airplane we're going to use today is the Just Flight Duchess. So let's get ourselves in the airplane and fly the approach.